Bob Claybrook is the practice lead for hybrid IT. He will be your host for Track B along with Jason Jolly. He is an executive here at MicroStrategies. So Bob, why don't I go ahead and kick it over to you to get Track B started?
Well, good morning, guys, and welcome. So we're here to discuss cloud technologies and more specifically the IBM Cloud Pak for applications. We're going to be going through a couple different tracks today on applications and integration, and then Jason and I will follow it up with some use case discussions following the two sessions with Sean and then Daniel. So Sean, you want to give us just a background? I know you have a few slides there. Why don't you give us the concepts and where we are with integration or Cloud Pak for applications, excuse me, and just set the context for us if you could.
Yeah, no, thanks. And once again, video problems on my end, so hopefully I'll cover on the voice side of things. So as I mentioned earlier today, obviously we came out with something in the order of 6 different cloud packs. And today's event, covers most all of them, in fact. So there's the Cloud Pak for integration, which is coming up, I think, after this session. I've been deeply involved in that. Cloud Pak for data, Cloud Pak for multi-cloud management, and Cloud Pak for automation, et cetera. And Cloud Pak for applications is probably one of the most interesting cloud packs, right? So when you think about interesting in terms of the alignment and strategy that we have alongside Red Hat, and frankly, just a tremendous, base of customers out there, right? So it's really, what have we done to rationalize our WebSphere constituency? And how do we align them alongside of what we're doing around open, not just OpenShift, but just open and cloud, right? How do we modernize? And again, like I said earlier today, cloud, I use that word as more of a catalyst. It's not an entity, it is the journey side of things. And so when we looked at this portfolio, because when you think about the cloud packs, I guess, Bob and team, many people say, oh, well, it's a combination of things. And it is to an extent. It's a culmination rather than a combination, but it's a culmination of events. In many cases, those are products that have eventually arrived at a state and time and maturity where we've got to say, okay, clients, where do you want to go next? And I think some of the things that we've heard from our customers is, I've got a skill equation that I've got to accommodate for. I've got, in some cases, 2 teams in my company where one is managing, I'll call it, the as is, and the others are building 2Bs. And sometimes those 2 teams are working in concert. Unfortunately, many times they're not. And there's the delta between those is both technology-based and skill, from the standpoint of how do I get those that are managing the existing as is and bring them up to the point of where we need to be. So that fundamentally, if we think about the Cloud Pak for apps, I kind of put it into 3 buckets, 3 essential spaces for our customers based on the investment they've had with us, in particular those customers that have been using our WAS base and some of our other application runtimes. And the first is, I'm not going to do anything. And that's, how do I continue to run my existing applications where they are today, possibly bringing into them new forms of automation, but yet I'm not going to refactor these. They're going to stay where they are. They're running mission critical applications. There's nothing I need to do. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And by the way, there's a lot of that, and that will probably continue as people prioritize. And then you kind of in the middle of the road, how do I modernize those existing applications where they are, introduce potentially some new tooling to those and capabilities. And then the final one here is new projects or building new applications. And what is it that can be accommodated for as I build these, not just with cloud native techniques, but with an eye towards, making sure that those new applications are built fundamentally on a microservices architecture, have high degrees of portability, and fundamentally are open, so that I'm not
So
locked in.
Sean, we're at the application level right now, right? So, when we think about containers and container orchestration, so if I look at my new app platforms, as you mentioned in your third bullet there, right? So cloud native is where we want to be, and ultimately that just allows openness. And I like the word boundless now, instead of cloud technologies, but just trying to build a boundless framework. But so we're cloud native. This is on new applications with microservices, and so I have the connectivity. Then I roll back into the modernization of existing apps. Really, when I think about it, I look run existing apps or modernize existing apps. That's just a choice, right? So if how much do I want to bring those function points into the modern side of the business, so to speak. And again, the whole thing here is to make those technologies more compatible with my business operations and more directly fed into what I'm doing to make them a part of everyday business, basically. Because many companies have legacy applications with some function points out that they never want to touch, right? So it's a question of how do you enable them to bring them forth and be able to talk to those modern or new apps that you're building, right, from a cloud native perspective with microservices. And then again, this is all encompassed. You mentioned OpenShift earlier, and we talked about it earlier in the day from a container perspective to allow me to span, public cloud, private cloud, or be able to tap into SaaS applications and such. Because when we just want to, this is the core to me. Applications development is the core of everything. Whether I'm building the application myself, I'm using a SaaS service, as long as we're following the same open standards with, now the latest standards are cloud native, but I can create that connectivity. What the cloud packs allow me to do is reach back into that legacy and run on one framework, or again, creating that boundless framework. So Jason, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's kind of how that's my perception of it. So
I agree 100%, meaning it does give us that kind of flexibility where we can have our legacy applications, not necessarily old, just they're the existing apps that we have, and we can build upon those. We can even start chipping away at them and taking some things and modernizing pieces of them, making them into microservices, chipping away the monolith. I think it's great to have that framework and then still have the basis for the net new projects where you know how you want to scale in the beginning, the technologies you want to use, those cloud native technologies that aren't just buzzwords, but they add real value, and they're all here in the cloud pack, which makes leading development teams, it makes my life a lot easier, quite frankly, having all this here.
They're all here and the methodologies work, so which is great. So I just want to add perspective and things as we go through. So go ahead.
No, absolutely. I mean, and I would actually kind of throw a question back at you guys. This is not a Sean Gavin fire hose session. Hopefully, that's not what it's intended for. But you work with as many clients and as I do, probably, maybe even more in some cases. As you look at clients and the considerations that they're making towards an application, let's say a new application, and the decision point to do that, let's say from a historical standpoint, the as is, am I going to build this new application just using what I know? Or do I begin to bring in some new concepts? Is there sort of a decision point that you guys look for as to, maybe it's business requirements, maybe it's, the type of application and what it's going to be touching, but is there a decision point that you look at with your customers or you've seen with your customers?
I'm gonna give a higher level response, and I'm gonna let Jason take it because I'm the infrastructure side of things. But from an application portfolio perspective, it really depends on what the lifespan of that application is and the service that it's providing, right? And then really the time to value. So if I'm looking at that as is application or more traditional app, and I can put something in attached to a microservice and bring it forward, versus refactoring, we have all the re's, right? Refactor, replatform, all those fun things that we'll talk about with the more traditional apps. It's really that's the pendulum that you swing, and then really trying to recognize the business value as quickly as possible. So pull out the features that you need, bring them forth, and put them in driving business value, whatever unification that's needed. So Jason, I'll let you take that. Sorry.
Yeah, so every customer that we engage with is at a different level of readiness when it comes to how they want to handle things like cloud native technologies, containers, container orchestration, all the different types of tools that we can use. So we often try to, if possible, help break down those problems and see where they can get to. how far they can reach. And a lot of that's having us help reach for them. Meaning we can help their teams get enabled on technologies, et cetera, or we can help try to abstract some of that learning curve away for them, so they can just focus on the core apps that they're building. And I think that's where a lot of this technology helps enable us. There's for a lot of customers, this is a lot of new infrastructure. Feels like a lot of new infrastructure, but not necessarily, right? If we can make their lives easier for that, and Cloud Pak helps with that a lot, and the technologies it uses like OpenShift, et cetera, helps with that a lot. Then we can have the focus being on just what the apps are and the business value that they're adding, and maybe take away some of the concerns about all the things around it that Cloud Paks and the technologies in it like OpenShift help provide for you, right? So I think every customer we engage with, if they're new to a lot of this technology stack, they voice a lot of concerns about, I don't know what containers means. I'm used to putting something on a VM and it runs over there, and that's fine. But I want to learn more, right? And that's kind of a common message we hear. And I think using things like Cloud Pak helps customers bridge that gap in order to get over that hump of knowledge sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and we can talk about a few things here that we do technically to enablement, but it is a discussion, and it's one, maybe for those that are listening, it's kind of what I'll call sort of the trade-offs. What are you going to do, and is there a trade-off around developer agility, right? Do you put more favor or interest in control and security governance? Is there a trade-off on a single cloud vendor, for economies of scale and talent focus, or do you leverage existing vendors and, try to avoid concerns of lock-in? The other one that we've seen come up is best of breed tool chain choices, or do you begin to standardize on a familiar single tool set or a set of tools in a, common framework? And then I think it boils down to in-house talent, right? Do you have to how much can you take advantage of? Where do you go outside? And then customer employee experiences, right? So how much of this is going to be accommodated from a security standpoint, et cetera? So it's always these trade-offs, which are kind of interesting. I don't know if you guys see that, but that is sort of a decision tree that we end up walking through with a lot of clients. Once they've made some of those decisions, then it becomes a question of, okay, now which levers and dials do you want to kind of spin here inside of this particular pack?
Yeah, it's definitely, and we said it earlier in the day, I think, and Sean, I've heard you say it, I think I heard you say it earlier, meeting them where they are, showing them the art of the possible, right? And then getting the framework built out and showing the deliverable, I think, because again, this is all about utilizing the cloud technologies, it's all about iteration, right? So we want to start small, get the confidence, and then roll it forward at the end of the day. So, and then how far can you roll back into the organization to further enable? Keeping in mind whatever the business value was you're driving for in the first place, right? And that's the one thing that I try not to lose sight of. It's not just about the technology. I mean, we're at an age, it's 2020. The technology works. The methodologies, we're calling it microservices and containers today, or Kubernetes today. Istio and service meshes for integration. So the stuff works. It's there. Now, how do you bring the organization forth to recognize the true value for your business?
Yeah, so maybe just as some background, so I would probably say, if I'm going to kind of walk through real quickly here, kind of what's in this thing, because some people are like, all right, got it, overtures, like what is composed of the Cloud Pak? Maybe just a minute here on this one, if you don't mind. So when we talk about, right, we've rationalized or the culmination of the Cloud Pak for applications. Fundamentally, what we've really said to this audience of our platform and runtimes is the ability, as I mentioned earlier, kind of run existing apps. And so for us, it's an interesting discussion, right? Because it's going to be WebSphere and all of its iterations, which is ND and Liberty Core, as well as for those that are building mobile applications, our mobile foundation, which is accommodated for in this pack. But what it also, includes is entitlements around JBoss, which is kind of interesting. So when we talk about open, and open also means choice. And so for many customers, we realized, well, we don't, we're going to have some opinions. No vendor doesn't, but we want to have what we believe to be as the best opinions that give our customers what we think are the market leading choices. And so that's kind of fundamentally one element when we look at run existing. What we were just talking about kind of on the modernization front, and this, I've got more on this and we can just touch on it briefly here. There's the decisions, right? The trade-offs, as we were talking about. But what we're also doing with this pack, and it's actually just, I think about a week or two ago, we've got some new enhancements and you're gonna see even more, you know, in 2021. And for those of you that might have joined us last week at our Hersley event under NDA, we shared some of this. And that is this idea of building underneath or alongside of our cloud packs, in this case, Cloud Pak for Apps, further automation. And you're going to see more on that theme. So I'll just tickle it out there. For those that want to learn more, I would say get with your MicroStrategies teammate and myself, and under NDA, we can share with you exactly what that means. And we're taking customers to be a part of that journey today. It's exciting, infusing AI and automation into app development, and frankly, all the packs. But for modernizing, we built into this Cloud Pak a transformation advisor, which gives you some of that, what I'll call trade-off analysis, but also will begin to do some of the modernization efforts for you when we couple it with our mono to micro, which is just kind of coming through the beta side of things. And that's refactoring those applications that I'll call, you know, historical applications into more modular microservices based applications. So things that you built, you don't lose, because a lot of times people say, hey, I'm going to lift and shift this, I'm going to rebuild it. I can't believe how many people rebuild things they already do today because somebody in the org doesn't even know it exists. We see that all the time. I don't know if you guys see that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You know, and then last point here real quick, and we'll kind of open it back up again, is really the I'll say I'm going full lock, stock, and barrel. I want to take advantage of really a multitude of different capabilities. I want to underpin my new foundations with an, you know, OpenShift and a Kubernetes foundation. I want to take advantage of not just my existing IBM runtimes, but I want to actually pull in some of the Red Hat runtimes. And so the beauty of this Cloud Pak is it gives you the utmost flexibility to deploy OpenShift foundationally for any apps that you have, take full advantage of your existing Red Hat runtimes, IBM runtimes, Red Hat code ready workspaces for those that do take advantage of that for, you know, as their IDE. And then alongside of that, we have accelerators that we've built in, which is kind of, as I mentioned before, it's taken advantage of what you've decided to modernize and pushing into that a development tool set to push those applications to more microservices based. So that's really the, I'm going full, you know, right or left, whichever particular direction you consider to be cloud native on my app side.
I think one thing that's key here, and just the way you have it laid out, is that the software on the left is running on top of OpenShift, or can run on top of OpenShift. And I think from that perspective, I know I look at OpenShift as, you know, a cloud operating system basically, so that we can operate it on-prem. We can and I said this earlier, we can operate on-prem, public clouds, wherever we need in one control plane, and setting up those sandboxes or areas to work in that Jason utilizes. And it saves so much time from an efficiency standpoint, and I can't, there is business value there. So just from the operations of the technology, great deal of efficiencies. And then when you start to talk about incorporating with the business and driving business value, again, we can put teams together with the business unit to deliver features on an as needed basis. And if we talk about the traditional or historical applications, as you referred to them earlier, Sean, we can tap those as well. So I think to me that's extremely important with the openness, and you mentioned that before. It's all about being open and knowing where we can go and bringing forth everything that is in the environment.
Yeah, really excited. I mean, Jason, maybe I wanted to ask you a question. I think maybe something we were just chit-chatting about as we were preparing for this. You know, when we see clients, you know, there's fragile and then there's agile, and there's agile architect, right?
sure.
You know, I've got a fragile app and I've got a fragile, you know, organization. So when you have worked with customers who are really decomposing their architecture as being an agile architecture. And we've actually written an ebook on this. I'm just curious, I've got a multi-cloud strategy, and because I suspect some people out there may be in this position, I'm looking at Kubernetes as foundational to that strategy. So it's nice to hear that that's a part of this, but I'm trying to figure out the orchestration of my Kubernetes strategy and where that exists in a multi-cloud world. How do you see OpenShift playing a role there as people begin to accommodate for that?
It's a huge role. So we have had to deal with everything. I mean, we deployed AKS, EKS, et cetera, on-premise Kubernetes. And us leveraging OpenShift has given us the ability to have kind of a standardized base to be able to do that. And Bob mentioned this, and I know we had this in previous conversations too, about OpenShift is like a cloud OS, and it lets us run the things we want on it. So with that, we can enable almost like a standardized sandboxing method, even for us, meaning, and for our customers. We can do something in OpenShift, have our areas that we have to work, we can have whatever runtimes we want, and we don't have to shift ourselves for every cloud vendor we're deploying to, or whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. We don't have to feel that lock-in of, okay, now I have to do things this way, now I have to do things that way. It helps a lot with that, and it also strips away some of that complexity. We don't have to have everybody on our team know how to go to the command line and start firing off commands to handle Kubernetes and bring up pods and down pods and all that kind of stuff, because it's just so easy with OpenShift to be able to handle it. So it really lowers the learning curve to be able to handle cloud native apps and the scalability, and that's a really big deal, because especially for our customers who don't have the time to invest as much in some of the learning, you really have to shorten that gap to help people get up to speed quicker. And sometimes getting the right tools like OpenShift really does help with that. It really does help bridge that gap between all these things that sound complex for people, like Kubernetes and containers and orchestration, et cetera. And it takes a lot of those complexities away for you. And that really, it helps us as a dev teams, and it helps our customers when we roll things out to them.
And it helps infrastructure teams provide that environment as well.
Yeah.
It relieves the tension between the infrastructure teams and the development teams, I guess the best way to say it. So
yeah, you know what? That's a great way to say it too, because we can do quick POCs. We can try something out, show it to the customer, so we can actually deliver value to the customer quicker, because we've been able to just throw something up, and we don't have our infrastructure team sweating, wondering what we've opened up in a firewall or what we put on a credit card or stuff like that, because we have this place that is a safe place for us to be able to do these things with and deliver quickly. So I think it helps the infrastructure team be happy and the dev team be happy, which is not an easy thing.
we've alleviated the holy war between infrastructure and intelligence, we like to say.
Yeah.
So you've arrived. It's interesting. I mean, I threw up this slide only because I think it's, as you're talking, it sort of just depicts that agile multidisciplinary team approach that you're talking about in the development process. Let me throw one other one at you, which is a little bit of a leading question and somewhat selfish on my end, and sorry for turning the tables, but how do you see, because when we think of this very agile world that we're living in and bringing these teams together, I mean, everybody has a different, they've got a different a way to approach the goals and objectives, right? And the speed that they're trying to do. And we're talking about accelerators and helping that and various methodologies that they can employ. But one thing that happens in this multi-cloud, multi-container, world, it's that word ephemeral. Things are coming up and coming down a lot. Yeah. What do you see? And I think this is maybe a reflective point for those listening, hopefully a little bit, the role of security and just security in general in the agile development and DevOps process. Like, how are you helping people overcome that complexity? Because it can be a big challenge and a huge risk. I'm just curious on your thought there.
Yeah, it has to be everywhere. Meaning, so security is pervasive in everything we do. It has to be, right? And having the tools to back that up helps. We have to care about, like, you have your security and governance, and being able to deploy someplace where we know. So our code, we build our code that gets static analysis or dynamic analysis, that it's actually scanned for vulnerabilities frequently when we're doing that. Our developers don't have to worry about that. They don't think, okay, I have to set this up for static analysis. The framework's all built and it's all done with how the projects just go through the regular pipelines. We have to think about, identity access management, how the data is protected, how do we monitor for events that are happening and detect issues, and then look at the policies we have, and knowing how to do all of those things, and then knowing how to do them on all the different frameworks that are out there can be pretty tough. So when we look at something like the cloud packs and with OpenShift, it does help standardize it for us so that we can live within the OpenShift and do our work there. And we know that it's been configured in such a way where all these things are already handled for us. I mean, there is the ability to make sure things are being implemented the right way, that it's being governed. You can actually monitor things and detect things. You can do that analysis that's happening behind the scenes, and you can make sure things are only provisioned by the people who should provision them. And then there's the very user-friendly interface on top, which makes it a lot easier. So I think the security has to be everywhere. We talk about it even from our code of conduct, how we do development processes. It has to be pervasive for everything. But having the tools to help with that and to make it so that it feels like it's happening without the developer having to worry about it too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to know they're doing the coding right. They have to be doing test development or all these different good practices. But they can know that they're provisioning as POC, as an example, into OpenShift, and they're not worrying about, did I just open something up to the world? Did I do this or that? I mean, the way it's been set up, it handles a lot of that, right?
It's I would say it's open, and the framework allows, on the security side, infrastructure side, allows us to put the tools in place. Whether we go with the base components or we want to incorporate another solution in, the OpenShift platform is open at the end of the day, not to be redundant, but and it allows us to set the containers up, container images. All those things are pre-built, so it really allows us to put that stuff in from a baseline perspective and keep things under control. And not that we want to control, but I'm just saying set the guidelines with a bumper, so to speak. And then Jason doesn't have to worry about it, but the development teams don't have to worry about it. That's it.
I love that, by the way.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah.
Not a lot of value add. It just needs to be there. At the end of the day, it's only a problem if it becomes one, right? At the end of the day.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I asked it because that's in part, right? We have these accelerators that I mentioned, and some of that is by design technically to help people in that domain. But the reason why I asked the question is we can have all these technical capabilities and stuff like that, but if you don't have a clear understanding of that organizationally, it can be a slippery slope. And one thing that we've done, by the way, and I mentioned this in the keynote, is we've tried to establish a lot of what we call ecosystem partnerships. And one of them happens to be the OpenShift Partner of the Year in 2019. So we were just talking about security and governance, kind of getting into that, air quotes there, a little bit of the day two ops and so forth to an extent, with a company called Sysdig, who we've seen quite adeptly operate in an agentless manner, kind of cloud native, be able to manage and secure Kubernetes containers, whether they are, GKE, EKS, AKS, but in particular, OpenShift in this case, all Kubernetes, and it's really helped us instrument in that DevSecOps role. So there's lots of different ones out there. It just happens to be one that we've added to the ecosystem of this. So
very nice.
Yeah. So I think, Bob, from my standpoint, as we're sort of bringing this home, hopefully that gave a general synopsis of what's in the pack. I talked a little bit about the Transformation Advisor and where it's helping to analyze and give people, as it depicts here, kind of detailed reports and artifacts of where automation can be done based on what they're trying to achieve. And then with Mono to Micro, really begin not just that recommendation and, again, analysis, but the refactoring of the code. You're going to see more on that, but with partnerships like yourself, that's really, I think, to the benefit of our clients, and frankly, a cost-effective way versus a redo, a reset, lift and shift. So.
Right. Yeah, we're going to continue, guys. We'll continue the conversation with the integrations portion. Obviously, integrations leads right to applications. So we'll continue that with Daniel in the next segment. Thank you, Sean, for the time. Appreciate it.